Welcome. In this lecture, I want to give a little bit well, I'm going to give two examples of where I talk about this function terminology, like the domain and codomain and image range, so you can see what we're really talking about. And this function f, so it's going to go from the integers. So my inputs are integers, and then my outputs are real numbers. Okay, and how is it defined? So when I input an element x of the integer, so when I input an integer, I'm going to take that integer, I'm going to square it, and then I'm going to add 1. So if I was looking at the graph of this, okay, so I'm going to draw this axis like this, and then this axis like here. And the graph of this function is going to look like y equals f of x. Right? And so far what we have going on here is that this is my x and my y. Okay. Now, what's going on a little bit further here? So our domain is the integers. So you could think of the domain as being, so I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. -1, -2, and -3. So my domain, or all of my inputs, is the integers. My codomain I've allowed to be all of the real numbers. So that's actually everything here. So my codomain is going to equal r, the real numbers. Okay, but you can kind of see, if I look here, what happens if I put in 1 into my function, then I take 1, I square it, I add 1, so I should be getting out 2. Okay, so that's an element of my image or my range, right? If I put in 0, I get out 1. If I put in 2, what do I get out? I get out 4. If I put in 3, what do I get out? Well, I've got, oops, this shouldn't be 4. This should be 5, right? Because what happened? I put 2, I squared it, I added 1, I got 5. I put 3, I square it, I get 9, I add 1, I get 10. Okay? And this happens to also work on the other side. I'm going to get these same kinds of values. So sometimes I actually think of this as being the almost the shadow, right? Because while I'm saying that this is the graph of the function, the only values we actually really care about are this one, and 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 this one, because my domain is just integers. So if you take those and you kind of shadow them onto your y-axis or your output axis, you're actually going to get what would be the image or the range. Okay, so the image is going to equal, so I have f of the integers, which is going to equal the set of all f of x, such that x is an integer. Okay, well, what is that? That is going to equal, well, I'm going to look at what happens when I put in, right? What happens when I put in -3 squared plus 1, and -2 squared plus 1, and -1 squared plus 1, and 0 squared plus 1, and 1 squared plus 1, and we can keep on going. Okay, and so we're going to get that this is going to equal, so I have, you know, like I could kind of see up there, I have 10, 5, 2, 1, 2, 5, 10, but I have duplicates in there, so I usually wouldn't write it like that. I would just go, so this is going to be 1, 2, 5, 10, and then we would keep going. Okay? What about in our other example? right? So what do I have here? So the domain were my inputs, and those are usually along your horizontal axis. Your codomain is everything that's allowed, but what actually shows up as an output, or kind of the shadow on here, is going to be your image. So we just did that by computing what you got when you put in the inputs. Okay, and then in our other example, so this is example 2. Okay, so we can define functions by saying, so we can define by saying where each element of the domain goes. So let's look at an example. So I could take this function L, which is going to have, so as my domain, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3. And then as my codomain, so every kind of possible allowable output, I would get blue, red, yellow, and black. Okay, and maybe I decide to send, so I need to say what happens to each of these elements. Well, maybe what I've decided is that this is going to equal, so my outputs I'm going to get are going to be blue, yellow, yellow. So 1 gets sent to blue, 2 gets sent to yellow, 3 gets sent to yellow. Okay. Maybe this is the first student is wearing a blue shirt, the second student's wearing a yellow shirt, the third student's wearing a yellow shirt. So this is actually the function giving the shirt color based on the number associated to the student. Okay, now looking at this, you can see that, so my domain, right, is just the set of allowable inputs. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3. My codomain is a set of allowable outputs. So this is blue, red, yellow, and black. Okay, and then my image is going to equal, so we have blue and then yellow. Okay, so domain is the set of allowed inputs, codomain the set of allowed outputs, and then what we actually get, right, or these values here, is going to be the image. So it's what you actually get when you actually stick in all the inputs. Sometimes your functions are actually defined by just telling you, if it's just a finite number of things, I could possibly just tell you what each output is, or I could use a formula like in this circumstance. Okay, so I hope that made some sense, and I will see you in the next lecture.